Welcome to the Dance Centre podcast. I am your host, Claire French, and I'm joining you from the traditional unceded territories of the Musqueam, Squamish and Tsleil-Waututh peoples, also known as Vancouver, Canada. I'll be talking to dancers, choreographers and other members of the dance world here on the West Coast to find out more about their creative work and practices and to discuss what it means to us to be dance professionals today. Thanks for joining us. Led by artistic co-directors Lisa Mariko Gelley and Josh Martin, Company 605 is an arts organisation based in Vancouver on the unceded Indigenous territories of the Musqueam, Squamish and Tsleil-Waututh First Nations, producing various dance projects and performances through shared creative process. The artists place emphasis on movement invention and physically demanding works, juxtaposing raw with precision and highlighting effort, risk and interconnection. 605 is an ongoing exchange between separate people, bodies and ideas, recognizing and celebrating the unique possibilities created in their attempt to coexist. With roots as a dance collective, the company was founded in 2009 and now has an expanding repertoire of diverse works and interdisciplinary collaborations. 605 has performed from coast to coast in over 30 cities across Canada, as well as in the US, Central America, Europe, Asia and Australia, presented at many notable festivals and venues such as American Dance Festival, UZNC, L'Agora de la Danse, La Rotonde, Danceworks, Live Art Dance, the Banff Centre, On the Boards. It keeps going. 605's co-directors have also created commissioned works for several other dance companies, including Vancouver's acclaimed Ballet BC, and their collaboration with filmmakers have allowed 605's work to be shared globally with award-winning short dance films shown at over 45 on-screen festivals around the world. I am absolutely delighted to be joined by Lisa Mariko Gelley and Josh Martin of Company 605. It's so wonderful to have you both here and to talk to you both. I'll try not to embarrass either of you, but I might because I'm a bit gushy over you two. So we're talking about many things. I would like for them to talk about their histories as much as they would like to share that brings us to a moment when we can talk about the work that they're currently doing. I think it's lovely and it's a nice chance to hear about their dance journeys, maybe how you met, what you started working on and how you established your lives together because you are also life partners. That's a bit much in one go alongside a dance journey that's so extensive as yours are. But I think if we can wrap all of those things up together, it will give a nice little bit of context. So Lisa, would you like to go first? Welcome.
Thank you. Thanks, Claire, for having us. Yes, I can start from the very beginning, which I would probably say would be in the early 2000s. Josh and I were both hanging around Vancouver and specifically Harbour Dance Centre, and I had already completed and Josh was inside of the training program called the Source Dance Company, which still is run out of Harbour Dance Centre under the direction of Joanne Pasusic. So she was offering some work opportunities for alumni and current Source members, and I think that's how Josh and I first came together. Was Joanne invited us both to work on a project together and we didn't know each other. So that's sort of where we began to dance and collaborate in a very different context than what we do now, but collaborate and make dance and perform dance nonetheless. And I think shortly after that meeting, we were both hired by Josh Beamish for his very large production in Vancouver that was called
Close enough, something like that.
Close enough. And there were so many dancers engaged in Vancouver on that project of Josh's. He did at the Cult. I can't remember the year, but let's say it was around 2004 or 5. Mm-hmm. And from there, I don't know. I'll let Josh take over from there.
Great.
Yeah, from there, I feel like it was one of these, early career moments where both of us were looking to kind of expand what we were doing and working on or learning. Lisa was heading to Europe for her own kind of artistic exploration, I think, going to a bunch of workshops and things like that. And I I just had this urge to, like, I needed an out also to be part of something like that. So I kind of followed Lisa a bit into what she was doing and tagged.
That's how you do it, Josh.
Along.
That's how you do it. Follow someone to Europe. Yeah. worked for us too.
So I kind of just followed her because she seemed to have this kind of game plan of the classes she wanted to take and the workshops she wanted to attend and that sort of thing. So after many months of kind of backpacking around different dance events and festivals and intensives and things like that, we did return back to Vancouver actually at different times because I had also like gotten a weird gig as a backup dancer for a French pop star at that time. And so eventually when we both landed in Vancouver, we wanted to keep working together, and we wanted to do so in the way that some of our peers and friends were identifying as maybe outside of the commercial dance realm. And that would sort of take all of the things that we had been compiling in our dance pockets and tried to kind of merge and combine them. So at that time for us was really Shea Kubler and Sasha Kozak, Michael Miauchi. I'm sure a few others as well that are probably worth naming, but just many of us that I think were feeling like a little bit held and bound by this experience of working really, really hard at doing a lot of different movement styles, but then getting gigs like in commercial or movies where you're basically step touching in a lot of that work and not really getting to truly utilize all of the kind of the hard work and practices that we had been establishing. And so Lisa and I had moved into a space at the ARC, the Artist Resource Center, at the base of Commercial and Powell. And we had converted that space into a tiny little dance studio, and our apartment number was 605. And inside of that studio, we hosted our friends and collaborators and began to kind of try and make things together and to teach each other. We actually did a lot of like free classes for one another there because we were also broke and couldn't afford to pay at Harbor Dance all the time. So we kind of did this sort of training initiative that turned into making work, which turned into these tiny little short dances that we had put out. And at one point, I think we were, programmed for some little arts event, and someone said, well, what's the name of your group? And we had to come up with the 605 Collective. And so that was sort of how we were born. And that was early and through 2006, I believe.
I want to go back just to what you were saying about the step touch and things, because I've often, still to this day, I watch if people aren't somersaulting, they're step touching or, with some arm coordination that may be a little more tricky than step touch, like slightly different timings, polyrhythmic stuff, slightly. But I've always engaged with how those dancers step touch. Almost like it's like what you're talking about for me is like the enthusiasm and that you conjure and that you use in order to do those moves and give it the energy it needs and all of those things. I see in the work of 605 Collective and Company 605 continuing through the energy around that, because there's a sense of that commercial level of energy of a dancer is what I sometimes, what resonates with me sometimes with some of the work that I've seen over the decade and beyond. I don't say almost two. Is it almost two? It's almost two.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, but yeah, so I find that really fascinating. Also because I teach step touch quite often, and my seniors won't mind me telling you this, they might be listening. But, step touch is like everything, and we do it in so many different styles. So it's really wonderful to kind of hear that correlation and just kind of put that into context. So, yeah, I love hearing about the beginning of 605 Collective as well. And I just love the realness of that, like how it came about through a matter of fact, kind of a necessity, but also what you did with your situation and what you've always continued to do in that. So we'll get there later. But Could we go back a little bit further? Because I think you both have your training before Source might be interesting as well for people to hear, because I think that's really eclectic too, isn't it? Absolutely diverse across for the two of you. And I don't know how different it is between the two of you. So maybe just a couple of minutes going back even further, and then we'll speed up.
Yeah, like many dancers, there was the dance studio experience growing up through elementary and high school years. And that was where I tapped into dance for the first time, and then kind of stayed into it. And what's offered at the studio that you go to is sort of what your biggest influence can be, or even your instructors and what they bring. And at the time, I was training at a studio in Burnaby called Spotlight Dance Center. And the person who created the Source Dance Company was one of my teachers in sort of the later years of high school. And she had an extensive professional commercial career that happened in the States and Canada, when, you know, lots of music videos and tour performances and all of those kind of things that I was really aspiring to be a part of, paired with another teacher who was very influential named Jennifer White, who came more from a ballet background and a Ballet BC mentorship program at the time, and so was sharing her knowledge in those forms. And so I already sort of came from this multi-form type of training, which I think is a common experience for lots of people who go to studio dance. So I kind of had these two mentors from an early age that offered their own experiences in worlds that were a little bit separate, but kind of collided in those early studio days. And so when I was thinking about what my professional career could be, I think I was pulled in both those directions in a way, and also a little bit insecure about not being a really strong ballet dancer or that kind of thing, but having like a sort of sensibility towards contemporary dance that was being introduced to me in those later years at the studio. So, you know, people that I danced with closely went to TDT or to commercial. We were bridging into those two different avenues. And I guess I held both of those interests. And my first impulse was to go into commercial dance, and then sort of a couple of years later really started thinking about how can I do more of the other thing or a little bit of both. And that's what sort of led me away from commercial dance into a search for, like Josh said, going to Europe, searching for some training in contemporary dance.
Do you think it was also connected to you wanting to create your own work? Maybe you didn't know that at that time, but had you had any kind of forays into choreographing yourself, or like even inside improvisation and things that maybe was a bit of a magnet for you?
I did choreograph from like the age of 10. I had that impulse early on. And I also, in my high school, had a really supportive drama program. So I was into directing and writing plays. I was a big like drama kid.
Awesome.
In school, and then a dance kid after school. And in both of those, I was, also thinking a lot about creating. And I guess I would say, like, fast forwarding, the need to create also came from, like, a necessity to do a thing that I didn't know if it existed. Like Josh was talking about, the needing to kind of being able to access everything that we knew and somehow allowing it to coexist, and feeling like while I know it did exist out there, I couldn't necessarily find it for myself. And so Josh and I and some of our colleagues and friends were, I think, after that, and that necessity to do something that wasn't directly offered to us was another part that kept driving that creative, like, choreographic kind of pursuit.
Wonderful. Explorers. Love it. Yes.
I guess, my experience is similar to Lisa's in that, when you're young, kind of the only thing that sort of exists in terms of dance is whatever dance your parents might have found for you to kind of enter into the dance world. And so, of course, in Alberta, in a town of only 10,000 people, there was just like one dance studio, the Camrose Academy of Dance. And so I was enrolled in like maybe first a tap class and, a class a week kind of situation. And then jazz. And then I was kind of forced into ballet class for a portion of that. But as you can imagine, being like the only male dancer in the studio, let alone in the city, that there was, of course, a lot of resistance I had to move through in order to like kind of keep doing it beyond a 12-year-old, like as I became a teen, especially that was a difficult choice to make. I guess I look back at it now as a bit of a resistance towards what was kind of the expectation of a person like me, which would have been more kind of get into hockey and do these things and kind of a desire to just not tread down the kind of most prominent path. Mm-hmm. But I did find, supportive teachers along that way. And I did also feel kind of encouraged because of being the only male dancer present to create my own stuff too. Mm-hmm. Especially in the later portion of being in high school. And then I also was kind of a drama kid also. I just felt more comfortable in that arena and liked being the weird kid or the strange kid or the one that's kind of trying to do something a bit different or explore different things. So yeah, I kind of just went through a bunch of the basic training, I guess, of just kind of being introduced to dance. And I too really felt like in terms of the career I was imagining, it was very much inside of pop culture dance and kind of mainstream ways of being in music videos or dancing for musician artists and that sort of thing. And I had not at all been introduced or being aware of another kind of dance that exists out there.
Mm-hmm. I don't mean to be self-deprecating. Well, I don't mean to be, but I am. But when I was growing up in all of the studios I was in and I trained in, people were really being trained for the cruise ships. And I always say that I feel so grateful that my legs were never really long enough. I never even went to the auditions for cruise ships. I was always interested in it for other reasons. I was always curious about it, and I always had questions and problems with it. And I was musical theatre a little bit more than straight up drama, but drama at school. But that was the world for me. Commercial in England at that time in the 70s and 80s meant cruise ships. It didn't mean music videos in the UK, at that time. That was a bit later. But that was pretty much it. So that was the world that our training was about and was kind of encouraging or promoting or existing because of.
Well, both of us can tell you all about that.
Yeah, I'm sure you can. Okay, can we do that then? Can you tell me about that? Yeah, let's do it. Just a couple of minutes on it. What can you tell me about it, Josh?
Well, I think it was both of our first kind of major paid gigs was doing a contract for a cruise ship. Because that is, as you say, it's like, that's the thing that you can first access is going to these auditions. I was just lucky enough to know somebody who was already kind of casting one. And so I just got sent to my first gig, 18 years old, got sent to Florida, learnt a bunch of shows, and then got thrown onto a ship for 6 months. And and it's a completely, bizarre world. And there are a lot of UK artists that were alongside me, actually.
Exactly. It's the vaudeville, command music hall, next step, on the ocean kind of training. Like, it really is huge in the UK. Yeah.
And but never ever since have I performed the same show as many times. So you get really you get really lost, I guess, in how many performances you have done of the same thing over and over and over again. That you will definitely get sick of the thing, no matter how good it is. You will definitely get sick of the thing that you're doing because it's just meant to be kind of pure entertainment.
Yeah, absolutely. And you'll never forget it either, will you? It'll be in your body forever. Your memory and all those places hold memory forever. What about you, Lisa? Was that obviously?
Yeah, some of my early paid work was, the first one was at the P&E. There was a show there with dancers called Fire in the Night, and I was a part of that show. I was still in high school, I think, at the time, in the summers, and then I was on the last year of the Vancouver Grizzlies Extreme Dance team.
Ah, you were.
So
I was going to ask if you ever had that experience.
Well, as you know, there's been a resurfacing of this conversation with the documentary that came out, and some of my old colleagues were returned to do those dances, and thank goodness nobody asked me to, because I don't think I can kick my legs like that anymore.
No.
But yeah, straight after that, I just went to an audition at Harbor Dance, and my teachers were pretty critical of cruise ships, and they said, don't do this. This will ruin your career. You'll lose all your technique and you'll get stuck on there forever and you'll never leave. Mm-hmm. And then I just decided to take the job anyway because I was offered a contract to go to Europe. And I said, I want to go to Europe and I want to save money. And then it was like, it was fun and awful and everything like that all at the same time. I also got to create a duet with my Canadian dancer friend that we got to do as a part of the programming on the ship. Mm-hmm. Got to save a lot of money, and despite what my teacher said when I returned back and took class, they were like, "You're the first dancer I've ever seen not lose their technique when they went on a cruise ship." And I don't know if that's because the shows were like challenging or because, I don't know. I had already known that was the threat, so I was really determined to not fall into that.
Absolutely. It's good to have that information going into it, right? And also you have all of these different perspectives, and then you make a choice about what it is for you. And it's really great to do that young is really important. And I know several people who are singers and dancers who have been on cruise ships who have been able to buy homes in the UK and here from the earnings that they made on cruise ships. So, yeah, I mean, we can criticize it all we like, but if you know how to use it and strategize well, it's a phenomenal opportunity. So, yeah,
absolutely.
Really good.
It's really the only reason that I was able to move to Vancouver in the first place. Like, there's just no way that I would have been able to afford getting out of Alberta without having done that.
Yeah, I think that's really fascinating, because my first professional choreographic gig ended up being an opera. So I didn't see that coming at 19 years old. I didn't see that. But that's just that was my network at the time. And that's what happened. That's how it happened for me. Could have been very different. So if we come back then to where you are now with Company 605, and maybe bring it back a little bit to the evolution of that collective into a company. I'm interested in hearing both of you maybe talk about what you think has been its growth or its evolution, and also maybe a little bit about how you've adapted what the company is, maybe as you've changed and evolved as people as well and as artists. So there's a little bit of that, maybe a little bit of backstory on the journey from 605 Collective to Company 605.
Yeah, I think that collective creation and coming together in peer groups is a really natural progression in early career. And I think that was really important to us at the time, to have kind of people who shared values, even ambitions around what and how they wanted to dance, and really being grateful for that time that we had together in those sort of years when we were developing our practice and integrating into the contemporary dance community. And then I think another natural progression is like the development of artistic voice, or even specific values that you need to pursue in different ways. And so I think essentially the story of the 605 Collective is pretty typical in that we all came together at a very emergent stage, and we learned a lot by working with each other, and then also had these sort of other paths that were calling us a little bit more specifically. And so a lot of the people that we danced with in those early days, Shay and Mariko, are still around Vancouver with their own pursuits, with their own projects and artistic work. And Josh and I kind of took the name of 605 Collective to form Company 605 at the time that people started to sort of diverge. There were some projects that were on the go. The seeds had been planted when we were still a collective, and that we were extending sort of the work or the life of certain projects with new people involved. And so I think that's part of the impetus for keeping 605 in the name, and then transitioning it to a company model, which meant to us at the time that Josh and I would be sort of the artistic leads, those accountable to the work of the company, and that we still wanted to keep this collective creation and the spirit of collaboration really central to what we were doing. So we thought that by transitioning to Company 605, we could hold all of those same initial values that we had in the early days of the collective and then continue to steer it as a company under an artistic directorship that could provide some longevity and some vision into where this company could potentially take us. And so, in a sense, the work during that transition period, or kind of after the transition, while it was directed by Josh and I, we had a lot of wonderful collaborators as dancers and other art forms, so we could keep that central idea really alive in how we were working. And then Josh and I just became sort of like the people that would raise the funds, come up with the proposition for the projects, and then sort of onboard those that we really wanted to work with. And then they could come with us for specific projects, and then they could go and do their other pursuits and dance with other people. And actually we could too. So we could have this entity that was supporting our collective creation that was led by us, but certainly not exclusively authored by us. And then we could continue on with our independent careers doing work with other artists. So I would say that was kind of how we transitioned from collective to company.
Mm-hmm. And so with my admin head on, my producing head on, did you also make that decision so that you could have more planning, say, in a way, that you could actually kind of engage with a project for a longer period of time, gather funds for a project and bring people in? And then, because for me, this is a little bit connected to both the extensive touring you were able to do with 605 Collective and also the scale of the works that you build, which require, a lot more time and a lot more resources to be put into them as pre-planning almost, as well as unfolding however they will and they can. So I wonder, was that also part of your decision making, do you think, or did that just come with having made the decision?
Oh, I mean, I think the structure part of it, like becoming a society and having to get the board of directors and starting to seek out more administrative management and support and things like that, you're kind of pushed into that direction just by the necessity of having to gather the types of funding and support that exists. Like there are really just barriers placed for those who want to continue to be an ad hoc collective or of independent artists. So it made a lot of sense that if we wanted to do anything larger or bigger, or for instance, go on a tour, that we were going to have to kind of create the structure around it as infrastructure and support. And also to, as you say, to start to imagine the entity of 605 as being its own kind of, it's its own existence that's separate from the artists that are kind of working within it. Mm-hmm. And as Lisa pointed out, like, it was really valued by us that we individually each get to keep being the artists and practitioners that we want to be without feeling like we are only 605. Yeah. And so we gave it this company and structure to be that entity that could house what we are and what we're making when it serves us, but to also continue having a presence without us if necessary.
Mm-hmm. That for me connects to another question I have for you around the experience of being in the work and not being in the work. Because for me, I think that choice to sometimes not perform in the work in front of an audience, that is, maybe you create it with the people in the room and then step away later, but that helps in some ways, that perspective, I think, for it not to be just a vehicle for you two as performers. Because if we don't see you perform in work by Company 605, then we suddenly understand your role is either more than or different to that. And then we also see you in other people's work around the same time. So that really supports what you're saying. Was that a hard decision to make, or is it actually piece by piece dependent, and does it just come naturally, organically for you as you think about ideas?
For me, I think it really is a case by case basis. So it's also just like, what do we feel like doing? And because I can argue for the pluses and minuses and pros and cons of artistically being inside or outside of the work on either direction. There's aspects of it that, for me, have made it much easier to really be able to step out and feel what a work is becoming from kind of that exterior, and to understand what the dance is doing. And then there's parts of me that feel so much like I need to create from my body in a way where if I'm not part of it, then I don't know how to serve it, you know, or I don't know how to guide it without really, you know, of course, everybody makes material and then sets it on other people or whatever. You can come up with lots of ideas, but to actually know what a piece is or what a work is, I think sometimes if I'm not in the piece, I feel like the performers of that and the collaborators who are inside of it just have actually way more information than I do. And I feel kind of left out of it.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. You have some FOMO. Yeah. And is the other one JOMO sometimes, like the joy of missing out on performing it? I'm sure is happening slightly, but it did for me at some point. Now I'm back. But Lisa, yeah.
I would just add, from my personal experience, a part of the decisions to be in and out of different works were also timed with me being pregnant and having children, and seeing that as a sort of need to be in my body differently. And so we had some works where I was in it and then I was out when I got pregnant, and was able to be on the outside and having the advantage of like having the physical experience of being in the work, and then having Josh and I being able to be in conversation about what was happening from the outside and the inside felt really useful. And then, yeah, so that's a very practical choice that I made in certain moments over the last 8 years. And then just to add to what Josh had already said, is that I do really feel even now that I have a different connection and understanding about the work that we're making when I'm embodying it. And I don't think I'm able to let that go yet as like a really integral part of making decisions around the choreography of a work. So it feels, it feels like it, having experienced both, I still feel called to perform and create inside of a work, even though it has its advantages and disadvantages for all the reasons that Josh listed. And then because of our unique circumstance where we are co-directing a lot of the time, I think it does grant us the ability to kind of get the best of both worlds. To be in, or at least say, oh, I could step out if I needed to, or be on the outside and say, I need to step in. Like, there are some works that I didn't do for a couple of years, and then all of a sudden I was like, okay, my kids have care and I'm fine and I'm here, I might as well jump in. And it's like, it can be really great to just have had the experience from the outside for so long and then step into it and then even learn more about it, just to being in relationship to the other dancers who are inside the work.
Because it is a very different relationship, isn't it, to be the proximity to the dancers when you're literally breathing, sweating, moving with them, and then watching that, which of course you have a sense of it from the outside as well, and are using all of that kinesthetic kind of information as you watch and observe, and kind of, so it's not completely separate. But I'd like to talk about Lossy and then into Sloth Canon, because I think they're two. I believe that in Sloth Canon, neither of you are performing in that. Is that correct? So then Lossy, you both performed in, and I won't dwell on it too much because this is where I will get too gushy or whatever the word is. But I just want to acknowledge my experience of Lossy when I first saw it when you were at the Wong Theatre. I was so grateful that you were both in that. And I felt what you were talking about, Lisa, with both of you, actually. My experience was I saw you two grapple with a relationship to performance. And in that piece, I felt like you took me on a journey. You took me on your journeys as performers, way longer than the piece itself, the duration of that and what you brought to that piece. And especially toward the end, I was so moved by it. For me, there was an element of, there was both the question and then there was kind of a resolve. And then there was a little bit of tension about the way in which you'd resolved it, which led to another question. And you took me on that quest. You took me on that journey in such a beautiful way that I left feeling like the only resolve we could have is to stay curious and stay open like water, my friend, that kind of idea. It was just that, and it was just so special. And I don't think I would have felt that had you two not been in it, because I don't think that depth could have come out of the movement and the performance, not because the performers weren't sensational and capable of it, but because I really felt your story and your narrative there, and that's what I connected to. So I just want to say thank you so much for that experience, which leads me to this new work, to Sloth Canon, and your decision not to be in that. I know you've also, the Loop piece, was it called Loop? The one that was, is it Looping or?
Loop Lull was the name.
Loop Lull, that was the one.
Yeah.
I think that was the first piece I saw of yours when I didn't see either of you in it, and it threw me at first when I was watching that. So I love that, because that was, for me, was a kind of a switch statement that you were making about what the company does. But you were present, you were in the space on the periphery, and I loved that too. I thought that was a really interesting part of the vision and the aesthetic and the form that you'd set up for an audience to kind of comprehend or kind of be in with you. And then Sloth Canon now, I see that neither of you are in it as performers. And I wonder if we could maybe head there a little bit into that process, but I would like to come back around to maybe some of the other things that you do with Company 605. This might be a good time to mention what the process is for you for Sloth Canon.
Yeah, to give some context to that project, much like our other commissions, it was kind of it was more like a company reaching out that wanted to engage with our company. So Lisa and I, for instance, when we make a work for Ballet BC, we're not in that piece either, right? So it's kind of like a different way of working. And this is similar to that in that this was initiated by the Human Expression in Singapore. And they're a dance company ran by an artistic director named Swiboon. And he had met me at a festival back in 2017, I believe. And then I had seen him multiple times since at other different festivals and events as I was touring a solo work. And so we just sort of established a relationship that was going to lead to me creating a piece on their dancers, which was all thrown out with the pandemic because I think they wanted to offer me a piece that would be commissioned and created via Zoom, and I just couldn't bring myself to do it. And so in the course of that, because the problem of going during that time was that I would have had to spend 2 weeks, I guess, holed up in a hotel room before I was even allowed out to even start working face to face. And so I had started to describe well, maybe there's a collaborative way of doing this where I can be a co-creator on something with the company where there's somebody on the ground there who is equally invested in the piece, not just a rehearsal director, but somebody who wants to kind of co-author this with me so that there is, at least somebody who's going to hold this thing together. And that just happened to naturally lead into a conversation about the fact that both of our companies had a lot of similarities in the way that we were wanting to work and the way that we were approaching collaborations and the way that we wanted to kind of root an exchange within what this project was. And this led to the natural evolution into a co-production relationship where Company 605 was going to put together the resources that it could find with the Human Expression. It would find the resources on their side of things. And that we would imagine this as a co-creation together, not just between artists, but as two companies that are really trying to kind of bring as much visibility to this and as much strength to the exchange as possible and establish relationships for them in Vancouver and for us in Singapore, and to try and really, build it in a way that was a conversation and dialogue between all of us. So they have a resident choreographer there named Anthea Sia, who's based in New York, very recently moved there in the past couple of years, but was a longtime performer with their company, who I actually have seen perform early on without, I met her, but didn't really know much about her. But she had kind of shifted into a choreographer role at their company and was doing more and more of this creative work. And so this sort of became a bit of a creative blind date between her and I. as kind of the main creative leads on this, as the kind of the co-directors of this work. And so the idea is that artists from our 605's network or family of people that we typically work with would be brought together with some of their company performers, some of their designers as well, and that this piece would be made together as one. And so that's just been initiated, just this year was the first creation process that we had, where I went to Singapore with 2 performers from Vancouver, and we began the first research process that would sort of kind of build the structure of the work. Really scary to kind of show up there completely unsure about how it would go and the culture of their room and the way that they would sort of take the ideas that I wanted to put forward, and then how I would receive Anthea's ideas and how we would sort of put these things together. But found it, really, really fruitful in terms of, I guess, just the ease in which we were able to put all of our ideas out on the table and sift through them together as a team, and to, start to build a framework for what this piece is becoming. And now the next step of their team all coming to Vancouver and spending a month here to finalize the work and go into production. And so I think that, immediately I know already that the performers, which is a total of 5, they just dance together so well and they move together so well. And I think it's probably just testament to their, experience and training and, the diversity of work that they've all kind of been inside of before, but just found that I guess you'd say the chemistry is right in a lot of ways for what could have been, a potential disaster, I'm sure, ended up being really exciting surprise for me to kind of just see how well they were gelling and how interesting it became, their dynamic that they created in the room.
Mm-hmm. Wow, that's wonderful. And so we're talking on, what date is it? We're talking in March. We're recording this. So they're coming over. And so by the time this goes out on air, it will be closer to performance, I think. So you'll be in a different place.
Yes, likely.
So as this goes out, you'll be in a different place. So where did the title come from?
The title I have to attribute to our composer, Matthew Tompkinson, who is a longtime artist who's worked with the company to design a lot of the sound worlds that we made. And our starting place when we were first kind of just conceiving of this work was a lot to do with kind of splitting and merging and something that was being broken apart. And of course, we were dabbling in the initial kind of easy answers to that, which are things that we use often inside of dance language or choreographic language as canons, and also used inside of musical language as well, a way of kind of taking something unified and then splitting. And we were talking about just the speed and phasing, I guess, is another tool that we would talk about, where by just slowing something down, it starts to fall off of its, original pacing, and therefore becomes a way of breaking apart these two elements. And he brought forward kind of, a lot of these types of canons, and these, especially in kind of old Renaissance music, the way of multiple voices kind of all utilizing a bass line, but all splitting apart from it in their own unique ways. And one of the famous ways of doing this is a Sloth Canon, or a prolation, which is basically one part that is twice as slow as the original and typically inverted or altered in some way. And so the title of Sloth Canon is just actually a musical term, but the image that it incites is actually amazing, because we also just hear it as like this poor animal that is moving so slowly, being shot out of a cannon and being thrust into an unnatural momentum, and how that feels like just something that kind of grabs an attention about being forced into a speed that you don't want to be. And I think that and how that informs the content, where we're really playing with this notion of this I guess you would call it like a tragic comedy where these people are maybe not just everyday people, but are kind of an odd team of sorts that has been thrust into a momentum that they're not really aware of where they're going and how, but they know that they need to try and move at a speed and create progress as a result of it. But meanwhile, I think naturally they might be more sloth-like in their true nature and are feeling the resistance towards that speed. And so there's a lot of ways that we're sort of comparing this to kind of, I don't know, all of the ways in which we've conceived notions of momentum and where we're going and how much we're kind of moving at a pace that we've never really stopped to think about. We just keep moving at this pace and in the hopes that it's going to lead us somewhere. And so there's just a lot of that duality that's happening in the work where there's this urgency to produce, there's this urgency to progress, but it's constantly being countered with the question of why or how or where it's going.
And I love the kind of essence or the kind of fundamental nature of sloth being to actually kind of almost rest, like to pull back, but just naturally, habitually to not to need to rest. It's almost like the sloth doesn't even realize what pace it's at.
Right.
You know,
exactly.
as a creature, it's a similar, it's so imagistic and it's got so much time and pacing and kind of pattern in it for me as a title. It's just so it's just so.
It's also like the term sloth as being a sin.
Yeah,
like
absolutely.
It's bizarre, this concept of slowness as its relationship to laziness or, you know.
Yeah, lethargy or, you know, what's it, apathy or something. Yeah. It's wonderful. Do you have anything to add, Lisa, or are you happy with where we can leave that here? I mean, it's early days still, you're in creation. So if there's anything you'd like to add, I'd like to give you the opportunity.
I just wanted to name the dancers that we brought into the project, which are Brandon Alley and Rebecca Margolick. Mm-hmm. And so there'll be two sort of dancers that 605 invited in, along with 3 dancers from THE, who maybe Josh could name. But together they're going to make up the cast of this work.
Would you like to name them, Josh, here?
Oh, geez. Okay, I'm not going to do well with last names, but the 3 dancers coming from the THE company are Billy, Shengen, and Haruka-chan. And again, I'll say Anthea Sia, who's doing the co-direction of this work and co-choreography of this work with me. And Adrian Tan is going to be the lighting designer that's coming on board from their company. And there's also another wardrobe and costume designer, Ani, who has been working with the company for quite some time as well. So there's a creative team that's really rooted there, but Matthew Tompkinson here doing the sound.
Yeah, wonderful. That's great. Can you just remind, was the Lola Award that I think you received the Lola Award? Did you receive it for this piece in this production?
I don't believe the Lola Award's attributed to any particular work. It's more of just
to the company.
A general acknowledgement of contribution to BC dance.
So that's where I'd like to move to a little bit. 2 things I'd like to just address here is that the work you do in the community, I think this is a really interesting zone. You are based at Progress Lab. There's that community. There's the communities you talked about that you've always been interested in, which is having working with a group of people, your peers, colleagues, interdisciplinariness across the board. You've also worked with dramaturgs. As you've mentioned, you've worked with other companies, been commissioned to choreograph on other companies for them, with them. But the community angle and community engagement, I think, is quite wide. So while your impact on the BC dance community is huge, extremely significant, it's wider than that in terms of who you bring into the projects that you're working on. You also support, mentor, produce other people's work, offer festival kind of presentations and all of those things. And so it continues. It keeps expanding. And I know, Lisa, you do a lot of volunteer work in community outside of dance and outside of the arts. You are involved in some of those things. And I just think it would be really lovely to hear about your relationship to community engagement. That could be a whole other podcast in itself in terms of that. But I'd just like to hear a little bit from you about how that's developed, where you feel you're at with that, and also maybe a little bit about, is it future movement or movement futures, which is one aspect on your website that I'm really interested in, because I think it's all tied in so much, but you just go so wide, and how are you doing that? Why are you doing that? Who is your community? How do you choose? Does it choose you? Like all of these questions around your embrace of the people and ideas is expansive. So what is that? What are you doing? How are you? The mentoring is big, including Festival of Recorded Movement. I remember you being instigators of that. You help people produce festivals, and you'll be named as people who are helping something happen. So maybe how did the offshoot festival things start? Was that a continuation of the mentorship that or maybe you'd been approached to mentor? Like, could you, in a nutshell, sum up somehow what all of community engagement is, how it serves you as well as people? That's huge. I know that's huge. I know we could spend 4 hours on this, but yeah. Lisa.
Well, we've been doing a lot of reflecting because we are writing our next 4-year core grant. And so thinking about the role that 605 plays or has developed into over the years from where we started to where we are now. Mm-hmm. Just the notion of the dance or the artist's career happening inside the studio is not one that's ever been a complete concept to either of us. So meaning that through necessity, which is something we've talked about a lot today, necessity driving kind of impulse or change. Here in Vancouver, we wear multiple hats, many of us do, and that can be in part because of, how expensive it is to live here and how maybe our dance community is relatively small, and so we reach outside of that into other art forms or other groups or identities as a means for survival in like not necessarily a negative way, but in a positive way, like thinking about all of the things that make up what a career is and how at the center is about creation. And maybe because artists have this sense of creativity as in terms of how they navigate the world, we're also thinking about coming up with solutions or possibilities or dreams that can expand from what we're doing. In terms of the connection with the theater community, I think I would say that it maybe grew specifically with theater replacement when at the time we were being managed by New Works, and Joyce Rosario was leading the team there, and she really was curious about us, Josh and I, collaborating with Mariko and Jamie from theater replacement. Way back in 2015, we made a work together with Mariko Yamamoto, and so we started to form our relationship through artistic practice and through making a work together. And then through that relationship, we realized that we could build on that in terms of the type of programming we might be doing. And they were inviting us in to help program and produce what was called Push Off. And it sort of started as like wanting to know a little bit about who we would curate in terms of dance and who was active in that specific community that we knew a little bit more about. And I don't know, it's hard to articulate kind of why, but the natural progression of building relationship through doing a project together and then creating an event together, into being invited into spaces like Progress Lab and joining a group of other companies that are working in similar and different ways, and then opening the possibility to what different practices can look like in sort of parallel or connected forms, started to potentially open up what we thought Company 605 could do and create that would complement and support the kind of creative work of making dance. That's my first spill of ideas.
I think it comes down to an ecology as well. I think that's something that becomes more and more apparent the longer you stay in this thing. It's just that like everything is in fact interconnected, and feeling that, as an artistic community, even as a sector, it's just, we need to kind of figure out ways of being part of the conversation and being part of being a service to it, I guess. And I think that that's my notion of dance citizenship, is that there's this necessity to be involved. And whether that's, of course, creation at the center of that, but then what are the ways in which you can be supporting the visibility of the entire community, or be aware of what the people are feeling as needs or wants or desires, as a way to be in conversation with that yourself, or to be an understanding of it. So working with other artists, other organizations feels kind of crucial to being a useful part of it. And I think that we gain so much by working with a company like Theatre Replacement on trying to decide what Push Off, Now Hold On, Let Go festival is a dialogue that then infiltrates kind of the rest of what we're doing. And that goes with everything that we're doing outside of the studio. Mentorship of a young artist who's trying to produce their first work, or partnership with Here For Now Collective on something like Boombox. These are all things that we can provide resources to, but they also feed us in terms of an understanding of our community, and an understanding of what makes us more relevant and responsive and integrated in the broader picture of what we're all making here. Mm-hmm. Because it's big. It's really big. And I don't expect that anybody's an organization that can be everything to everyone. But if there is the mindset of being in service to it, then it all holds itself up. Like, it all kind of gets a stronger network that weaves it together in a way that I think is really, really necessary for survival, as Lisa says.
Absolutely. I feel like it's like the kind of underground tree network, like the roots of the trees, that it's like that. It's the strength of that allows for more growth. You gravitate towards the similar, but only similar in terms of questions or investigations, and then you're still free to become your own tree. I mean, sorry, I just needed to finish the metaphor, but I feel like you've created that. It feels like responsive as opposed to reactive. That's a really big thing for me, just really trying to understand the difference between those two things. To respond is a much more sensitive way, and a much more kind of gravitas way of connecting to a community. It's like you say, it's more about being in service too, but it's more about recognizing and acknowledging what is worth supporting. It's almost like, what is possible? What can our resources? How can we support this? Not what support does it need, but how can we do this? Is where the community comes, right? Is where the relationships form, positively and negatively, I think. But I think it's a really beautiful thing, and the way you've described it is really beautiful. And it's almost like you talk in the Sloth Canon description of like hell-bent on moving forward, and I really feel that. I feel that's genuinely what's been happening with your work, and what you two strive to do as artists, is that you're hell-bent on moving forward, and you're going to do it deeply, and you're going to do it thoughtfully, and you're going to bring people with you, and there's all of that. That's a really big part of this. So thank you so much for this thoughtful conversation. I think that's wonderful. There's so much more we could talk about, I think, but I think this is a really lovely way to kind of bring it maybe to a little bit about what's next. I'm only thinking about that. I know you're writing a grant, and it's about a 4-year, there's a 4-year kind of plan in there, and not to talk about all of those, but is touring in the plan? Are you still interested in touring works? Are you still interested in commissions? Like, is it all continuing, or are you in a transition phase again, do you feel, or where are you at? Just hopes and dreams.
I don't know when we haven't been in a transitional phase.
No.
But I think that, I guess that's the point, right? Is we're not trying to just lock into one thing. We're trying to actually, as you say, be responsive, constantly transform into what's actually occurring around us. And I think, of course, I don't know any artist that's not interested in touring, or not interested in sharing their work further. Mm-hmm. I think that there's a way of doing that I think is sustainable, and there's ways that are not. Certainly, I'm considering that. But, we're in a different landscape than we were 5 years ago when we first, I guess the last time we wrote Core Grant would have been like 7 years ago, in fact.
Yeah, so, because it was extended because of COVID, right? They just extended it. Yeah.
We're in a different place altogether. And I think the world's changed, not just the company. And so we're trying to kind of reckon with who we are now, what we're doing now. But absolutely, it still involves all the kind of core mission elements of what we set out to do in the way of making work that is in relationship to the place we're in, the people that we're with, and to try and share that as broadly as possible to continue the conversation with the global community and the local one as well.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much. This is so great. I mean, I have a whole bunch of new questions, but you mentioned dance citizenship. You mentioned that you are the ones who are accountable of the work of the company, and I think they're really lovely, like, bullets for me leaving this with this idea of accountability of having a company. And as artists, that's we are accountable for the work we may be putting out there, but also that this wonderful connection, I think, to like an understanding of the length of time you've been working, but you're still exploring, you're still kind of seeking out new collaborations as well. And I would argue a little bit, or not for the sake of argument, but I have experienced some people who are only thinking about how their work that is not going to change fits in with the world now. That the work isn't the thing that has to change for them. For some of them, it's how its relevance that they're trying to reword or rethink, not necessarily the work change. And I think what's beautiful about what you're talking about is this confidence, but also this kind of versatility and adaptability to also be willing to let the work change, because as artists, we're constantly growing and maturing, but maturing doesn't necessarily mean just getting older with our work, right? With the work we used to do. It can also mean, to allow that to change. So I'd like to leave with, I would love to know what it feels like for both of you. How would you describe the feeling, your current feeling about being kind of seasoned artists? What is the feeling? You've been doing this for a long time. I have a few things that I've been thinking about for me, and I'm just being nosy now. I'm just really curious about how you would answer this. But I feel the time. I feel the time that I've spent as an artist, or the time I've spent creating, the time I've spent in creation. I feel the accumulation of experience. I feel insight, that I'm constantly surprised by how much new insight I'm given by continuing to create. I feel the weight. I feel the weight of that, and maybe the responsibility, but I feel it as a weight. And I also feel the finite, like the reality of it, and then the expansion of possibility. And I think you as a company also offer all of those things in the work. And if you look at your oeuvre of work, I think they would see it in that. But how would you describe the feeling? Where are you at with that sense of feeling as established artists, creators?
I think right now, if I had to answer that question, which I do, is
you don't have to.
I guess what's coming through most right now for me is just thinking about people and relationships and how we kind of collect or develop these really deep connections to people over time. And like, I think, when I think about like sharing with somebody that's like just starting out, I really just want to emphasize that it's the people that are around us, or that we choose to seek out or connect with and have conversations with, that are really fundamental to the thing that we're doing. And, today, even thinking back to like my high school years and feeling actually quite grateful for those people that were guiding me into a sort of direction or a track, and that through all of our experiences, with the company and within the community, there's just people that are willing to and want to be curious with us and make things with us and keep doing this really kind of hard thing together, and are really committed to that act of like coming together and having conversation and sort of being willing to change in whatever ways that are required of us. And so that's mostly what I'm thinking about right now in this moment, is like, I'm so lucky to have met and continue to be very close with other people that care about similar things
Wonderful.
that I do. And I actually think if I wasn't to be in an artist community, I don't think I would have that same like depth of appreciation for people that are constantly teaching me and pushing me into things that are uncomfortable and being there beside me when it happens. So yeah, that's what I'm thinking about right now.
Thank you.
I just kind of like always smirk at words like seasoned or established, because I don't feel that. I don't feel seasoned. I don't feel established. I don't feel secure in what I'm doing or making. I still feel like I'm just not good at this yet. You know, I still feel that in all the ways that a choreographer, performer, director, artistic director, like I'm not sure if I ever will feel myself in that place, but I do carry a lot of the gratitude that Lisa's talking about for the people that I'm able to feel that alongside, and to understand that, it just, if I was doing this purely on my own, I don't think I'd still be doing it. And that's just what it comes down to. So being in relation to something, someone all the time has been kind of the only thing that has allowed me to feel like this is worthwhile. This is something I need to keep going at, and something I need to keep trying to dig at, as whether that becomes my life's work or whatever. But it's feeling that kind of the support that's just kind of existing in that act of reaching out, and in the act of inclusion of the people around you is maybe what it's all about. And I feel that maybe as the progression of our work over the past 20 years, it's like it started as about trying to make a show, and then it became about trying to understand process, and then it became understanding the value of practice, and then it becomes understanding that you're just a group of people, and that needs to be central. Like the idea that these people are the work, the people that we have in the room and around the company, that is the work that we're doing all the time. So that's what is making art for me now, is the people that I'm engaging with.
I am so grateful for both of you. I'm so grateful that you are engaging with, you continue to engage with it. And I will just say, I think sometimes, the humility shown here and that level of care is also what makes you both so amazing. And that's for me. I can say that. You didn't have to say it. I said it. And that's what other people say, right? Other people can tell you you're amazing. It's okay. You don't have to, though. But honestly, I really do think it's just so wonderful, committed, devoted, energetic, relentless in a soft way. Yeah, just really appreciate it. Thank you so much for taking the time. Really looking forward to the show, as I'm sure all of the listeners are too, and seeing this latest collaboration of yours. Well, they can definitely find you in many, many places and find you in the future. So thank you so much to both of you. Best of luck with everything and with your grant writing. Thanks for taking the time.
Thank you.
Claire.
Bye for now.
Bye for now.
Thank you so much for listening. We would love for you to subscribe, rate, and review wherever you get your podcasts, as this will help other listeners find us and help us to grow our dance audience. We'll be back next month. In the meantime, you can follow us on Facebook at The Dance Centre, Twitter at Dance Centre, and Instagram at The Dance Centre BC. And if you'd like to support our work, please consider making a donation. Just go to our website at thedancecentre.ca, where you'll find extensive information about our upcoming programs and events. The music for the Dance Centre podcast was composed by James B. Maxwell. Always a pleasure to connect with you through dance. Until next time.